Imagine being 20 years old and inheriting the throne of a kingdom surrounded by enemies who all expect you to fail. Now imagine not only proving them wrong, but also conquering pretty much the entire known world in just over a decade, all before your 33rd birthday. That was Alexander the Great, basically History-S version of that kid in school who not only aced every test, but also took over the school board while inventing new subjects, just for fun. But here's the shocking part. Alexander might have been a genius on the battlefield, but in his downtime, he threw wild drinking contests that occasionally ended with people dying. Yes, the man who conquered Persia couldn't conquer his own hangovers. And here's a bit of rare trivia. Alexander named over 20 cities after himself. That's right. Forget influencers naming star constellations after their cats. This man renamed whole chunks of the map just to say, this is Alexander Town number 14. Somewhere out there, his horse Bucephalus was probably thinking, so, do I get a city too? Spoiler, yes, the horse did get one. Or consider this. Alexander once took an arrow straight through the chest in battle, pulled it out, and kept fighting. Imagine playing a video game on hard mode, taking a critical hit, and then just shrugging and going, nah, I'm good. Welcome to History Makers, where history is chaos, comedy, and brilliant accidents. If you love insane but true stories from the past, hit subscribe and like this video so you don't miss the next adventure. Today, we are re-diving into the whirlwind life of Alexander the Great. The kid who studied under Aristotle, partied harder than rock stars, and conquered empires faster than most of us finish college. Let us find out how a short life turned into one of the biggest legends of all time. Alexander was born in 356 BC in the city of Pella, the capital of Macedonia. His dad, King Philip II, was a hardcore warrior king who basically turned Macedonia from that random place up north Boca into a military powerhouse. His mom, Olympias, was intense. She told young Alexander he was descended from Zeus himself. Imagine your mom telling you every morning, "Don't forget, honey, you're the literal son of a god. Also, eat your breakfast." Now, Alexander didn't have a normal childhood. For starters, his parents fought constantly, and when they weren't fighting with each other, they were plotting against political rivals. So, Alexander grew up surrounded by drama. Think ancient Macedonian version of a Netflix political soap opera. But he also had a secret weapon. His tutor was none other than Aristotle. Yes, that Aristotle, the philosopher who basically wrote the instruction manual for Western thinking. Imagine being 12 years old, and your personal homework helper is one of the greatest minds in history. No pressure, right? Aristotle taught Alexander about philosophy, medicine, science, and of course, the idea that Greeks were naturally superior to barbarians, which, spoiler alert, Alexander took to heart when he started conquering said barbarians. As a teenager, Alexander showed early signs of being, well, extra. For example, there's the famous story of the horse Bucephalus. This massive, uncontrollable stallion kept bucking everyone off, and the king's men gave up. But young Alexander figured out the horse was just scared of its own shadow. He calmly turned it toward the sun, hopped on, and boom, he had a legendary warhorse. His dad, Philip, was so impressed he supposedly said, "Son, you're too big for Macedonia. Go find a kingdom big enough for you." Which is basically ancient parenting code for "you're going places, kid." By the time he was a teenager, Alexander was already commanding armies. At 18, while his dad was away, Alexander led troops at the Battle of Cheronea and smashed the enemy lines so hard that people realized this wasn't just a royal kid. This was a prodigy. But then, family drama struck. In 336 BC, King Philip got assassinated by one of his own guards during a wedding celebration. Some say Olympias had a hand in it. Others say it was just palace intrigue. But either way, Alexander suddenly became king at just 20 years old. 20. Think about what you were doing at 20. Probably stressing about exams or figuring out laundry. Alexander? He's taking over kingdoms. As soon as Alexander took the throne, enemies smelled weakness. The Greek city-states rebelled, Persia started plotting, and everyone thought the 20-year-old king would crumble. Spoiler? He didn't. First stop, Thebes. They rebelled against him, so Alexander marched in, crushed the rebellion, and burned the city to the ground, except for temples and the house of the poet Pindar. Why? Because Alexander liked poetry. Imagine if every dictator was that picky. Destroy everything except the library. I like the cookbooks. Then came Persia. For centuries, Persia had been the mega empire, the big boss of the ancient world. Alexander decided, yeah, I'll take that. And so began one of the most ambitious military campaigns in history. At the Battle of Issus, Alexander faced King Darius III. Outnumbered, Alexander charged straight at Darius, who panicked and fled. Picture the CEO of a Fortune 500 company sprinting out of a board meeting while the intern takes over. That was Darius versus Alexander. One of the wildest moments happened after Issus. Darius offered peace and even offered his daughter's hand in marriage. Alexander said, "No thanks. Why settle for half an empire when you can just take the whole thing?" That's like being offered a half a pizza and saying, "Nah, I'll just eat the entire restaurant." Alexander's army swept through the Middle East, Egypt, and into Asia. In Egypt, he founded the city of Alexandria, which later became one of the most important cities in the ancient world. It had a massive library, a lighthouse, and all the good stuff. Basically, it was his way of leaving Yelp reviews across the map. Alexander was here, 5 stars. But Alexander wasn't just about battles. He had style. He adopted Persian dress, married multiple wives from different cultures, and encouraged his soldiers to marry locals too. His dream wasn't just conquering, but blending cultures together. Imagine if the world S.A. most successful military general was also the world S. biggest multicultural wedding planner. Of course, the campaigns weren't all fun and games. The battles were brutal. At Gaugamela, Alexander once again faced Darius, this time with an even bigger Persian army. And once again, Alexander's tactics smashed them apart. Darius fled again. If this were a video game, Darius would be the final boss who just keeps running away, making you chase him through multiple levels. Eventually, Alexander pushed all the way into India. There he faced King Porus, who brought elephants into battle. Elephants. Imagine showing up with horses, and suddenly your opponent has mobile tanks with tusks. Alexander still won, and afterwards, he was so impressed by Porus that he let him keep ruling his kingdom. Respect where respect is due. But then, Alexander's men hit their limit. After years of non-stop campaigning, they said, "Listen, boss, we love conquering the world and all, but we're tired, and we miss home." Alexander sulked, but finally agreed to head back. Spoiler: it was not an easy journey. The march through the Gedrosian desert was brutal. Thousands died of thirst and heat, while Alexander insisted on marching alongside his soldiers. At one point, his men brought him a helmet full of water. Instead of drinking it, Alexander poured it out on the ground to show he wouldn't take more than his men had. Inspiring? Yes. Wasteful? Also yes. But hey, it worked. His army loved him for it. Back in Babylon in 323 BC, Alexander was at the height of his power. He ruled the largest empire the world had ever seen. And then, suddenly, he got sick. Within days, he was dead. He was only 32. Theories about his death include malaria, typhoid, poisoning, or just years of non-stop war, and drinking, finally catching up to him. Some say he drank a massive bowl of unmixed wine at a party and collapsed, which is one way to go out. Death by overenthusiasm. But here's the thing. When Alexander died, he hadn't named a clear successor. His generals immediately started fighting each other, splitting the empire apart. Basically, Alexander's death triggered the world's biggest inheritance squabble. His empire was divided, but his legend only grew. People admired his boldness, his ambition, and his ability to inspire loyalty. Even centuries later, Julius Caesar visited Alexandria and wept because he realized Alexander had achieved so much at such a young age, while Caesar felt he'd done nothing by comparison. Imagine being Caesar, the guy who conquered Rome's enemies, invented salad branding, and still feeling like an underachiever because of Alexander. And let's not forget the trivia. Alexander probably never lost a single battle. That's right, undefeated. His win streak makes even the best sports teams look like amateurs. Oh, and remember his horse Bucephalus? After the horse died, Alexander founded a city in its honor. That's true loyalty. Imagine if every pet owner did that. Welcome to Fluffy Town, named after my hamster. So, that was Alexander the Great, the man who partied like a rock star, fought like a legend, and died young enough to become eternal. A man who never lost a battle, but somehow managed to lose control of his own empire the moment he was gone. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe to History Makers, and tell us in the comments which fact about Alexander the Great surprised you the most. Was it the horse city, the endless Alexandrias, or the fact that he may have drunk himself to death? Because history isn't just old stories. It's the wildest drama you've never seen on Netflix. And trust me, Alexander's season finale was a cliffhanger no one was ready for.